Feel like we're waiting for Sajay to show up since he's the one that adds some of the agenda items. And just DM Sajay. He said he's going to be about 10 minutes late, so I guess we can get started without him. There are 2 items on the agenda, both from Sajay asking about the 1.0, the release on, or sorry, 1.1 for image spec, and then also for talking about outstanding issues on distribution spec. Has anybody had time to look at those yet?
I
Yeah.
think I'm with Tianan on the image spec being pretty much ready, though I will admit that at least on the Docker engine side, I don't think anybody's done a PR to see what pulling in the Go code looks like for a hot minute. But it's rather innocuous, especially the spec changes in the specs Go folder.
Yeah. I've been looking to see if I can find anybody that has implemented some of the stuff that I've been thinking about on the index change, adding the refers API on index, and I haven't seen other people implement it to the degree that I have yet. So I was hoping to see that and I didn't. So I feel like they're working around a lot of issues just by not even doing things. There's Sajay.
Hello. Sorry about that. Back
No
to
problem. We were just starting to talk about in the image spec.
yes. So, do you want to do another RC? I think that's where I'm hearing it's okay. Distribution definitely has another issue to solve, which is kind of relaxing the artifact type requirement, right? But image spec, is there anything pending? It's probably the ask. And that's why I left the PR at draft because I wanted to kind of like have the discussion before even opening up the PR.
My biggest hesitation, well, 2 hesitations on GA. One is that we don't have the paired distribution spec to go with it. And so I'd like to see those 2 go kind of together just in case we come across something distribution spec later on and realize, oh no, there's something wrong. We need to fix everything. So I'm hoping to see us get there. But the other issue is just that we have made a lot of changes since the last RC. And so I feel like anybody that's implemented it based off the RC they'll be approving something they haven't tested yet. So it'd be good to get a new RC out there.
Sounds good. So then I can start with an RC for image spec, distribution spec. I'll put the distribution maintainers at responsibility because I'm not on that, so I can't create that. So it's the I think I can't do both. That's what I'm trying to say.
I feel like I don't have the bandwidth to do either right now, but yeah, appreciate everything there.
Yeah, it looks like there's nothing left in Milestone on the image spec.
I'll probably end up going through issues and any PRs that are outstanding just to see if there's anything I can think of that we missed. I know I did one of the big passes earlier with a lot of the specs before. I feel like we're getting into a pretty good place though.
So I will follow up with an RCPR for image spec before end of week. I know it's a long week. I mean, Monday's a holiday, so people will have next week to kind of like review. You can take it from there. Do we have a PR for the artifact type index issue on distribution spec or no?
I don't think we have a PR for that. And I know we've also got an open question on not just the artifact type field, but also whether registry should be allowed to reject things. That was also another one of the issues out there. So I think we've still got a little bit of back and forth debate. And also the new refers header we've been talking about. So we've got 3 different things in flight on distribution spec right now that I'm seeing.
Okay.
On distribution spec, are there bullets that people want to discuss from some of those outstanding issues out there? I'm thinking that I'll go ahead and put a PR out there for that OCI refers absent header that we had talked about before. So at least get that one moving.
With the split approach that was discussed before.
Yeah, if people want to implement the link header separately to bypass one of those round trips, we can get that as a separate PR too. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, exactly. Splitting the hint as to where the actual refers response can be found from the hint that is a positive or negative statement on the presence of refers.
Yeah, the absent header would be something that I think anybody can implement if they want to. Like I say, this is always a should, may. We can figure out which of those two make the most sense. It's an optimization. And so I think registries would want to have that optimization to cut down some of the client load.
While I have John on the call, any concerns in cutting a new RC for image spec, John? I don't know whether you heard that or you joined late.
I'm not opposed to cutting a new RC, unless you're asking me to personally do it.
No.
Okay.
I'll do the work. Don't worry.
That seems fine.
All right. Thanks.
What are your thoughts, John, toward GA in terms of your comfort level?
I've been ready for a while, I think. But I have very different concerns about things than other people, which has been proven to me over the past few years. So I'm happy to wait until everyone's satisfied, I suppose.
I guess where I was going with that is if we can cut an RC, but if we then 2-3 weeks later say, let's go with the GA, I want to make sure that there's not a, now I'm going to say we don't want this.
I'm fine with this going GA as is. but I would like everyone who isn't me to also be fine with that.
Oh, and I think I saw Saeed adding another item to the list today. Does anybody have anything else on the distribution spec, or should we go ahead and look at Saeed's request? Am I saying all right, Saeed?
All right, thank you,
Yeah,
Brandon.
go ahead.
I have a very simple question, and I think this might have been addressed before. One thing Quay.io does is when you do a tag list, we do pagination. The actual spec says to list all the tags, regardless of how many they are. But what we've found is some repos have thousands and thousands of tags, and abusers tend to go after that API to basically DDoS us. So we've added pagination. Now, the side effect is that we're not OCI compliant, and people keep complaining that you should be. So I'm wondering if is that expected, or can we do something about it from the spec side?
We deleted that accidentally. I say we, but I didn't do it. That is part of the spec in my heart, I swear. The pagination exists, and I've implemented it several times now. So I'd lobby to bring that back into the distribution spec if people are telling you that the pagination that you implemented per the distribution spec is non-compliant with the distribution spec.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking as well. Sorry, Brandon?
You've implemented with a link header, though, haven't you?
I believe so.
Yeah. And yeah, I remember having to fix that on my side when I ran into that.
I'm
Wasn't
not pagination optionally allowed as an extension, I thought.
I think it's required, or it was at some point.
The way the spec is written is that the client can enforce pagination by saying, give me n number of responses, and then that last header. So there is pagination in there, but it is client enforced, not server enforced. And when we put the link header in there, that's the server saying, we're going to push pagination on you.
I don't know if it's currently this way, but as was originally written, the registry can basically ignore the page size and give you whatever it wants. And you are supposed to just follow the link header, and constructing your own like URLs is frowned upon, but somewhat widely supported.
Right now, we've got the response must include a number of results unless you have less. So the registry is not allowed to ignore it in the current spec.
Yeah. Can we change that from a must to a may or something like that? Like, I just want to be compliant, but I don't want to get DDoSed.
That's so reasonable, you know.
It is a good request, one that I want to support, but also one that I want to be careful of, because changing a must to a may, it's a breaking change depending on who you are. So all the clients today that are trying to access it and saying it's not working, they're OCI compliant today. We changed this. We now said that all those clients are no longer OCI compliant.
They would still be compliant though, right? Like, if you're returning more, that's always complying with like a may.
Well, I mean, I the way I'm reading this right now is that, yeah, if you don't specify a number of tags, the entire list of tags must be returned. So there are very reasonable compliant clients that are going to assume that an unpaged request is going to be in totality and will misbehave if that's not the case. Like, just the language today as written.
Understood. So it's more on the client side, like they expect all the tags to be present.
Yeah, I mean, what we're suggesting is to change the spec to say that all the existing clients are no longer conformant, and that's
Gotcha.
dangerous.
Yeah, I see. Maybe we can add a clause saying that there could be pagination or something like that.
In the original spec from our friends at Docker, there is language that says if such a registry may also limit the amount of responses returned, even if pagination was not explicitly requested. In this case, the link header will be returned along with the results, and subsequent results can be obtained by following the link as if pagination had been initially requested. We need that. That's actually how clients work. And so the fact that we don't have this in our spec is hugely terrible.
Is this something that we want to add just to tag? The reason I'm asking is I know we've been talking about deferring a lot of these external HTTP specs to maybe being some kind of generic. This spec applies with various upstream HTTP requirements across the board and make sure your client supports them all. And so do we want to make that like a top level change?
I think we should give enough information that someone doesn't have to read the whole RFC to understand how to write a client to do it, but we should cite that and say like, so there's 3 now APIs that can be paginated, one of which has been effectively removed, but catalog tags and refers should all use this mechanism, and they do in real clients and real registries. So maybe we have like a pagination section in the API spec that says this is how it works.
I just feel like this won't be the last time we talk about pagination, so it'd be good to have one implementation of it that defers as much as possible to an external HTTP spec than to have it written for each individual API.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about the fact that registries can essentially throttle you by returning a subset, and that clients can request certain page sizes. But beyond that, it's like follow this link header.
So the current must language is going to complicate this because we're going to break existing clients.
The current must language broke existing clients is wrong. I mean, I don't care because this is wrong. I think it's more important to be correct than to like abide by normative language that is wrong.
I feel like the fact that they're getting questions, and I know I run into it when I try to implement it way back in the day, that there are clients out there that don't expect there to be pagination just by reading the spec, that they're following what they thought the spec said.
Did we release it with that stuff deleted?
Probably.
I believe so. I think if it accidentally got deleted, there's that one PR in distribution spec that not nominally reorganized the spec, but in practice, like a lot of wording got slightly shuffled. Is that maybe the one you're thinking of? Like I can't remember.
Where we deleted most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is bad. I don't know if there's a way to have like errata, or if we should cut V2 that says oops. Like
I want to look at a third option, which is that we leave the old API as it is and that we think about implementing pagination in a new API.
That's so bad. I'm angry about it. Because we have implementations that exist today that do this behavior that's different from what we've specified. And so like, are we going to have a new API that no one implements that we specify and make everyone implement that instead of actually having the spec be true?
Well, because what I want to do is
for Quay to implement the old API, they to have the old endpoint. It doesn't solve the problem of the servers doing more work than it wants to. because to serve a conformant response on the old endpoint to be conformant with the old version that's deprecated, you still have to. I mean, does that reduce the server load for well-behaving updated clients? Yes, but it doesn't solve the problem necessarily of bad actors causing a disproportionate load on the backend service.
Well, are they intentionally DDoSing, or is it just effectively people are creating tags all the time?
So we've seen these behavior with like bad CIs. So some CIs go rogue and just shuts our database down.
Yeah,
Then
I don't think it's malicious. I think there's a lot of really bad clients out there. So the path I'm going, if I was to do a new API, is it would still be under tag list. I wouldn't change the endpoint itself, but I would have an accept header and a content type. And so I would say I'm accepting a new format of response, which has better data. And then the content type would say, here's the new fancy API response here that has not just tag listing, but maybe manifest and other kinds of details we want to throw in there. And that would be paginated.
You know, I want that, but that's not the solution to this.
This is why I'm dangling this in front of you.
I want that desperately, but that doesn't solve this problem for me. Because I think the problem is that this spec has a bug in it, is that we deleted some very important information that's useful and required if you're going to write a client that actually works or a registry that actually works. I think we fix it. And if that means cutting like 2.0 of the API spec, okay. I don't think we need to. But I don't know how much people care about semantic versioning.
I do see Brandon's problem here of just, even if mistakes were made in the spec language, it was left there long enough that bad assumptions ossified. So you have registries that were built around one version of the spec language and clients that were built around another. And either way you go, you're going to piss somebody off and break somebody. It's an awkward spot to be in.
I think very few registries. Well, so here's the thing is that in Quay's case, they're doing the correct thing that was in the spec at one point, and 90% of clients and registries implement this behavior. If someone has read this and said, oh, as a client or registry, like I'm supposed to return the full set, or let's think about registry's perspective. If a new registry thinks that they have to return the entire set of tags if it's unspecified, that's fine, right? Like that's not going to break because they're still going to return the full set. Clients expecting the full set are going to break, and I don't really feel bad for them because I wish people would stop writing registry clients. So I'm happy to break those clients because new registries are going to be harder to change than like a new client. And I think that there's probably 0 instances of that in real life where like clients are relying on the fact that they get a full response from the registry, because that would only be the case if they only talk to new registry implementations that return the full set. Because as soon as you actually try to rely on the fact that the registry is supposed to return the full set, you're going to hit the fact that nobody does that. So like if you have one client that talks to one registry implementation and we change the spec, that doesn't affect you. So I'm camp fix it.
What is the line that's causing people to see this as the registry should return the full tag list? Is it, I have not thought about ever returning the full tag list if you even have a reasonable amount of usage, right?
Yeah, that would be like the common assumption. But the spec says you should return the full list. But no one does it. So like it's kind of no one's compliant now.
No, but specifically, which line is telling that we should return the full list or must return the full list?
Upon success, the response must be a JSON body of the following format, and it's basically all the tags. So it doesn't say like the registry could limit it, or there's no language that talks.
It doesn't say the registry can't limit it, though.
Yeah, and that's why I'm wondering. It's never been. I mean, there must be something that caused people to believe that, right?
I think that a reasonable interpretation is that since it says the number parameter is optional and the registry must return n responses when the n parameter is set to an integer, somebody could reasonably infer that with it being optional, with it not being included, without any language to the contrary, it's a complete list, even though, that appears to be somewhat accidental. I mean, it does. I guess the question I would have is, if people have reached out to Quay getting confused by this, and my client is conformant, why doesn't it work with your registry? Who have those clients been, and what have their responses been when you've tried to explain to them the pagination behavior?
I wouldn't be surprised if half those clients are curl.
I'm of the opinion that the language in the spec does not guarantee this. Like, it logically, it should, but reading between the lines is very different from normative language. So like, this not saying the response must include the full set of tags means that we can fix it, in my opinion.
If someone today sets in to 10,000, does Quay honor that?
No.
Yeah. And that's where we're specifically against the API or the spec.
No, we aren't. Point. The response to such a request may return fewer than int results.
But only.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where Quay's not just hitting the ambiguity, they're hitting the explicit text of the language.
Who added this?
The fact that it has less than 10,000 responses to me as a client says I've hit the end of the list.
What?
There's no reason to call anymore.
What is the point of pagination? I'm frustrated. I want to change it. I don't care if we break stuff. This is wrong.
But that's the logic of the pagination is, once you get less than n responses, you hit the end.
And no, so the logic of pagination is once there's no longer a link header, you've hit the end.
We didn't define the link header over here.
We did, and then someone deleted it.
Well, and this is the same as this is fundamentally the same as, like, I don't know, reading a file using the C standard library of, I set my buffer size really large. It didn't fill the whole buffer, so it must be end of file without any out of band signal. Yes. I mean, it's a very reasonable assumption for clients to assume that I asked for a massive buffer. You didn't fill the whole buffer, so you must be out of responses for me. Given this right here.
I mean, no, that's not true. End of file or something like that signals end of data, right? Like, you think of a network request, right? So a network request may not fill your full buffer, but there is still outstanding data. Unless you receive an end of file, you should assume that there is still more data.
Yeah, I think we took care of this in the referrers API though. We didn't want to touch the.
we did, which triggered John a while back of why we redefined the link header when it was already defined elsewhere, and then he went looking and was like, "Darn, we didn't."
I'm so triggered. This is why when you make a PR, don't delete the entire repository and substitute your own. Instead, make small changes, please. I guess I'm happy to go rogue and define this to be correct. I don't care that this is wrong, and like someone may have assumed that it was right, because it has never been correct. This has always been wrong since we released it. Like, it's not that we are changing the behavior of something. Like, we have not invented an API, right? We are documenting an API that already existed poorly, and hopefully no one has come and read the OCI spec and said, "Oh no, we're now non-compliant because we're doing the correct thing," and then change the registry implementation. Right? Like, has anyone done that? Quay, don't do it.
Everybody's done that.
No one has done that.
API. No. I think everybody has had the link header from time immemorial. It's probably omission.
I will say Reg client implemented the link header when I hit Quay.
Yeah,
or then I didn't need
all clients do that matter.
No, but before I hit Quay, I didn't have to do it.
What? You would have had to do it in other instances.
It was working everywhere else but Quay.
What about Docker Hub?
I think they even allow it. They at least honor whatever number of N I was putting in there.
ECR doesn't. ECR just returns you a failed response if it's too big, actually, which is great. Maybe they fix that.
Or maybe everything on Docker Hub hit just didn't have that many tags.
I think that's the limit. If it's too small, then you don't hit these edge cases. It's when you have larger limits that people really care about it.
So how about this? Can we just have Quay start deleting a bunch of tags?
No,
It's a joke.
It's
Can we
probably
fix the spec?
not way. It's all the other people who have pushed images.
I really think we should just fix the spec. Add a pagination section. Describe the mechanism. And call it.
What's going to get ugly is now we'll have two different definitions of pagination.
No, we don't.
Right. It would still be only the link header.
With the language that was here, there is one way this works. Clients can ask for certain things, but if the registry returns a link header, then that's how you do pagination. This was settled like 4 years ago. Longer, probably. I remember because I asked. It's like, hey, shouldn't it be this? And I was like, yes, it should be that. And we all decided, yes, the link header is the mechanism for pagination. I don't want to relitigate this.
Did Rom just find that John's the one that messed it up?
I think it's because like listing tags pointed to the catalog description of the link header as this is how pagination works. And when someone, maybe it was me, deleted the catalog stuff, they deleted all references to the catalog stuff, including references that were semantically reasonable. And then someone came through and they were like, hey, we don't have a description of how pagination works, and then just made one up, which is wrong. Hey, I said that in 2020. Yeah. Okay.
I'm on board with like fixing the spec itself.
I even fixed the typo. I'd say we do the scream test. Like if we change this and someone comes to us and they're like, hey, we implemented this version and it's now you made a breaking change. I'm happy to argue with them for an hour. But
They'll
like,
say that after we release 1.1 though, not
that's
before.
fine. We can always release 1.2.
How would we fix 1.2 after we release 1.1 with changes in a way it doesn't break clients and servers?
I think it doesn't matter.
I think that is the errata of like calling out that there are errors in previous versions of the spec. There are unintentional changes that may have been misleading or led to unexpected behavior. And it just has to be as part of the spec. There were errata applied, and here specifically called out the things from the previous version of the spec that are incompatible, but intentionally so because they were in error.
I don't think anybody is going to go and implement it this way. It's just unreasonable to ask any implementer to have full list responded. And if the spec is impractical, then it's probably valueless in many ways. But maybe for historic reasons and semantic version reasoning, that's a different conversation, right? But the reality is nobody's going to go and implement it this way.
When you say no one, are you referring to no registry or no client?
Definitely no registry.
Yeah. I mean,
it's the clients.
Again, my argument is that if you have a client that implemented it this way, then it doesn't work. Or it works with a registry that implemented this way, and only that registry that implemented this way. So I don't know of any registries that implemented this way, really. So therefore, there must be some private bespoke registry implementation that has the behavior. And if that's the only registry you're talking to, it doesn't matter. I think. But I also am arguing for my position. So I'm probably hand waving over reality a little bit. But you can't implement this behavior on the client. It's wrong. It won't work. You're going to be getting partial responses and not realizing it.
That's what clients are seeing today. And the way the clients try to work around it, it's not working for them.
What clients? There's like 3, right? And they all support link headers.
It's people implement it with curl. That's what you get.
I don't care about that because that's wrong. Like they're getting wrong behavior currently. And so we should document the actual behavior so that they could write a client using curl that does the right thing. Right now, you just have to like derive this from like debugging it. It's much better to our curl users to document what registries are doing than like kowtow to random curl user who is mad that our spec is wrong. Right?
Just to kind of get out of the logjam, do you think an errata is okay? I just have to play the good cop here. Is it okay to kind of like get an errata out saying that, oops, sorry, we missed this, and this is how we would like you to implement it, and like a screen test and wait for it for a 1.2? I don't think this deserves a 2.0, but maybe I'm wrong, so I'm okay either way.
I don't even think it deserves a patch release.
I'm
But
just nice, John.
yeah, I also don't care. If there's like process that we have to follow per some governance document about breaking changes, that's fine. And I think we do whatever that says. If that means 2.0, fine. But like fundamentally, the spec is wrong. We need to fix it. And the consequences of doing that, whatever.
I love there's this one hint in there of that a link header was possible somewhere else. You know, this was only that one situation where you're not supposed to open the link header, but we kind of implied that link header was valid, but never defined it anywhere else.
The link header is described in the refer stuff, which wasn't in the release that this is in. So that sucks.
Yeah, but it's just funny that we did imply it with this one sentence, but nowhere else in the whole tag listing do we specify it.
Mad. We should cut a PR with like the correct language and whether or not that lands in 1.1, whatever. But we should land it very quickly because if people are pointing to this and saying that they're non-compliant, then that's a problem.
So is there an issue for this right now or no? Or Syed, you just kind of like brought this up on discussion, right?
Yeah. Well, there isn't any issue per se, but it makes a lot of registries basically non-compliant.
Yeah. Please file an issue. Or maybe someone should.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, that got me all worked up.
That was entertaining.
I said some things I probably didn't really mean.
It's not a fun OCI meeting unless we do that.
It's too easy. Not fair.
So that has one more thing that we should probably consider fixing before we do a 1.1 drop-up distribution spec. I think it'll be good to get that in.
This is why I wanted to unblock image spec, because this is snowballing at this point, right? Like everything is going into 1.1, and that's going to push a bunch of other implementations down the line. At least if the schemas and the persistent formats are fixed, we can move on.
Part of method to my madness of saying let's try to sneak that into 1.1 is it's a small enough support the link header. There are already registries doing that out there, at least one.
Yes.
The other method to the madness is that I really want to revamp the tag listing in a 1.2, and I'd like to split these out.
That's fair. I just want to probably like channel my inner Josh Dolitsky and make sure that we don't have an infinite time before 1.1 for distribution spec goes. I know Josh is not on the call, but at least I'm sure that I'm the only one pushing for image spec. I would like somebody to push for distribution spec as well. And I'm not on the maintainers list, so I can't go push the buttons there.
I mean, I can nominate you to be a maintainer.
Let's not get there right now. Let's get the maintainers to do their job, and before we change that. So.
Yeah, I'd like to spend some time probably this week to work through some of the distribution spec stuff. So I should have a little bit of time later on to try to get some of those at least as PRs out there so we can get this to a state we can cut a new RC.
Sounds good. So the set of issues that are there in distribution spec right now, is everything required for 1.1, or are we like, is that list set? Because otherwise we don't even get to a point where you kind of put a time window for release, right?
If you're asking me, I was never the one that put a time window. I was always when we finished. I know others wanted to see the time window though.
I can't speak for people who are not here too much.
Cool. So I think the biggest takeaway is a few more issues over on distribution spec. And well, one new issue and a handful of PRs that hopefully we can get worked through without too much trouble. And then, yeah, I'd like to see us get to the point that we can do a new RC for that one as well. So RC for image spec, hopefully an RC for distribution spec soon. And then I'm as anxious as you are, Sajay. I'd like to see this get cut and released here.
Yeah,
I'm just more cautious.
Yeah, at least from I asked like Bin and Avril, those folks on to kind of validate that they've run the conformance test. They found a bunch of like minor issues that they had to fix internally, but nothing major. Yeah, just hoping to get a release out. That's what.
It has dramatically reduced my fear and panic seeing a lot of the issues come in from people trying this out over on the Docker side and over on the Azure side. So knowing that people are trying it and saying, hey, we're running into stuff makes me a lot more comfortable that we're going to get to the point that we can't release this soon. But then they are throwing issues out at us.
Pagination is not related to that, but
it is not. It's an easy, quick thing we can throw in there that I think we can get fixed in the spec while we're working through some of these other things that we do need to spend some time on. And so subject and the artifact type, I don't think that's even a big one. Yeah. I don't think the OCI refers absent header and even putting a link in there. I don't think that's going to be a bad thing to add to the spec. That's a performance improvement. It's a may or a should, so that shouldn't be an issue. So there was one in there that I was worried about though. Was it the non-existent subject? That's the one that's going to be the big back and forth, I think.
Yes. So what I'm hoping is that at least have some logic in or some process in what makes it into 1.1. Otherwise, this can keep going on forever, right? So we should probably like follow this is what 1.1 means and everything else kind of goes to 1.2. Now that at least we are getting releases out to more frequent cadences. Otherwise, we could pin everything to that specific release and block this one forever.
So I'll drop the link to that one just because I know we have a few different people here today. My tab again, where did my tab go? Tab overflow.
Assuming you mean the non-extant subject and manifest. There you go.
That's the one. So this is going to be the one that's going to be the blocker that's going to hold us up. So I just want to keep pounding on this one because the sooner we can solve this one, I think the sooner we can get to the point we're ready to release. And so this is the one where if we can't get to a happy conclusion, I think that can stall us. So if nothing else, we have a few different people on this meeting than we've had before when we're chatting about it. So if anyone hadn't had the chance to look at this, the overall response, the overall concern is you can push a signature before you push the manifest it's signed in the spec as we've written it currently. And the Docker concern is no, they don't want to do that.
The issue for Hub is mostly that the refers API with the database with the data model and the database layout is incredibly expensive if it has to be queried every time. Whereas if it can be strongly associated with the thing that refers to it during upload, then the database query can be optimized. It's mostly just it will not work at Hub scale without significantly re-engineering Hub with the way it's written today.
So John, I'm curious, did you spend any time doing implementations to this one that you ran into concerns on that from your side? Or even Sajay?
Yeah, we wanted this because of the signature presence before the image. Without this, that's going to be hard to implement. It's not impossible, but it's just we have to do something else to solve that scenario.
Well, I think if we relax the language, a registry could still implement it, right? So it's on the client to determine what order it wants to do the uploads in, if it has a fallback behavior. And that's my theory. We could provide guidance on what a client can do to support certain flows. But it's not saying that registries shouldn't allow signatures. It's just saying that they are not required to allow a dangling symlink, a dangling reference to exist.
From the client side, the few concerns I threw out there, one was that if you say that registries may reject it, then you're always going to have the case where they refuse it. The other one I was looking at was if a client can be assured that all the content is there on the registry, if it's doing mirroring or something like that, if it knows that the source of whatever that image is always going to push the metadata first and then the final image manifest, it can turn mirroring code into a very efficient workflow. You can turn on some efficiency where you say that as long as I see that same hash on the mirror server that matches the hash on digest on the source, you know that you have all the content. You don't have to go through and recursively check everything.
Well, but given a push and tag workflow, you could still know that. Assuming the tag was present, you could not tag until things were consistent because you would still need out-of-bound knowledge. In a world where you can push signatures before referees, you still need out-of-band knowledge that that's actually what the uploader does, right? I mean, I guess the advantage would be that you could check for the presence by digest instead of by tag. But otherwise, I don't think it makes a difference there because you still have to encode that knowledge that this will be complete when it's visible in the registry out of band.
Still a lot of stuff that works by digest, though.
If
Like if you're descending down a multi-platform manifest, all the individual platforms will also be by digest.
if we had never introduced the referrers API, would this even be a problem? Because technically you should be able to push a manifest and the subject is just a extension JSON property that we should be able to push. So the signature should be able to be pushed. I think the issue is the consistency of the referrers API. Is that what the issue is at this point for Docker?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is implementing the refers API if the graph is allowed to have dangling nodes is not. I mean, how would I put it? The alternative, as far as I understand it from the registry folks, is just not allowing this anyway and being willfully out of compliance with the spec. I don't think that they're willing to go the other way, but I mean, say they did, it is that the refers API would be very expensive, whether it's in latency for a client, whether it's in cost on the back end. It's expensive enough that it is a sticking point to allow for dangling references.
I hate when people do this to me, but I'm going to do it to you. I don't have a good model of what the backend data model would be that would make this expensive. Is that could I look at like the distribution implementation to understand why this would be expensive, or is there something else going on?
I'd have to ask Derek. I think so. The hub is running a fork of distribution. I think it's pretty close. So probably because distribution does reference things as a tree. I mean, the main issue is that either when the thing that is being referred is uploaded to memoize the relationship between those two database objects, they would either have to, during upload, check if anything is referring it, or when the refers API is used during query, they would have to figure out what the associated objects are across a very large data set. Whereas if the objects are all strongly related during the initial push, if there are no dangling references, then that association of objects, think of it just as like a foreign key relationship, could be established for free. A single query that is much faster. I don't have the full I only have the high level like architectural diagram. I don't actually have the implementation in front of me.
I just in my mind, this is straightforward, but that is assuming that I know anything about how this is implemented, which I don't. So I don't expect that there's an easy solution. But I would be interested in talking to someone who like can answer those questions, because like I would expect this wouldn't fit into the existing tables or table equivalents, but I don't see this being impossible to retrofit. Not that I think they should have to, but this is like a fundamental disconnection between my perception of the data model of references and what Docker Hub wants to implement, where I think they're two different things, and that's bad. They shouldn't be two different things. So as a client, I should be able to like treat these objects as the same across registries.
I'm trying to sort out if you're saying that's bad because we have two different interpretations of the spec, or if you're saying that's bad because everybody should just think the same way John does.
Both, maybe. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm biased.
I think that it's historically distribution as interpreted the spec as defining a graph, a strongly connected graph. And there's multiple ways that, I mean, it doesn't have to be implemented that way, but this is maybe the first time that like multiple implementations having different data models is more prominent.
Right, because you need an index for this. And if
you're using like a relational, if you're using like a relational database that just uses indexes, this is straightforward. But as I understand it, Hub implements something that is closer to a directed acyclic graph on top of a relational database model, and it makes assumptions about what it intends to maintain invariants that allow it to optimize the queries into that actual relational database. And so this would break those invariants of if something is referenced, it must exist in the database. But I mean, Derek used to work on this and is picking it back up. I'm not sure why. I actually haven't asked him why he hasn't been here the last 2 weeks, but I should get him to come back because he can explain this much better than I. It was him talking with the registry folks at Docker that spotted this would be an issue for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I think through it, I kind of shared John's question of, does it need to be that tight link between the two? It feels like it should be something that could be a loose connection, that you wouldn't have to have that tight database connection.
But they don't want loose connections. They want everything being referenced to have the graph, to be in the graph.
I mean that is basically it. The technical. I mean that could. I'm sure that could be unwound, but there is not the. I'm sure that you could probably try to retrofit this on top, but the whole system is architected to have a strongly connected graph, and that's not something that people want to change.
Every manifest with a reference, the reference already exists.
But that's not true, right? Like, non-distributable layers existed, and they weren't distributed through Docker Hub, and those references were weak. I mean, perhaps manifest to manifest relation is different, but like, there are already two types of relations in the database.
Yeah, I'm just speaking from my memory of the code, so I'm not familiar with the one you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean it's a fork of distribution, but like distribution does represent things as a graph.
Yeah. I just like, this is fundamentally different from the existing relationships in the graph. So I would expect there's some work to do to support the new type of relationship.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, it doesn't sound like they're doing that on the first implementation. They're just adding an additional artifact manifest type scheme.
I mean from my perspective, the crux of it here is more that it imposes a burden on registries where it prescribes that they have to use one data model or another, and that some implementations are, technical merits aside, are more prescribed or less prescribed by the spec. Whereas, so it feels like to me that is an undue burden on the registry side. Whereas on the client side, yes, you would require additional fallback logic, or you would have to think of different push modes, push before, push after. But it seems like the burden is less on clients. You can provide similar guarantees, maybe not all of the same guarantees, depending on how you implement your client and what you decide to do when a registry does or does not support this behavior. But at least you allow for flexibility in registry implementations and data models. Basically my supposition is that the burden on registry authors is much higher than the burden on client authors if this must was inverted.
It's where we're basically deciding whose use cases we're going to support, because we're going to disable client use cases to support registry use cases or vice versa.
I mean, if it's burdensome to implement this lookup, and the whole point of this was this lookup, so I would say it's better if Docker Hub just doesn't support this at all and lets clients do the fallback behavior themselves. And then maybe one day in the future, with a giant lift that is hard to justify, like, Docker could add support for this. But I think it's worse for Docker to reject this than to implement it at all.
It's also hard to make this a must later on. Changing that from a may to a must is almost impossible.
Well, it's also changing that clients today, right, if Docker wasn't blocking stuff, talking to a registry can push this stuff in advance. And now we're going to say that the content that they could push before is no longer content they can push to a new registry, because we're implementing new restrictions that didn't exist in the previous.
Well, it's not a restriction; it's a relaxation. It's removing a guarantee, which is not the same thing as a negative. But you can no longer assume that it's allowed. You have to check.
It's adding a restriction on the content that's allowed to be in a manifest that didn't exist before.
How is it adding a restriction?
If you have a subject field, the content, the subject must exist in advance, where that was not checked before because it wasn't part of the spec.
Well, I think the language is the other way around. It says today that you must accept a dangling reference, and the change is that you may accept a dangling reference. So it's not saying you should reject it. That's not what's proposed. It's not proposed that you should reject it. It's proposed that you may not have to accept it. The distinction being that you can still do that if you want. Your registry can do that. You can even invent your own header or something to let your clients know that it supports that behavior if you want outside the spec. It's just that to be conformant with 1.1, you would not be required to accept content that has a reference to other manifests that are not yet present.
But where I'm going is in the 1.0 spec, that field was not defined. And so the response in 1.0 when it wasn't defined was you can't do anything with it. You're just supposed to ignore an unknown field and not throw any errors. And now you're going to throw an error for a field once we make it known.
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily unexpected. If you invent a new field, that field may have rules and validations applied to it. I mean, in this case, it's that it may be optionally validated is what's suggested. But I don't think it's necessarily out of left field that you added a new concept that introduces a new field into the data interchange format, and that field may have certain rules for what is allowed or not.
Let's table this. If we can get Derek to talk to us, that would be cool.
I mean, I think we need more people on that GitHub issue. Like, I haven't really chimed in because it's kind of just been Derek and me by proxy and Brandon. But if we get other people to chime in there, and then I'll pin down Derek and get him to come to next week's if we want to put this on the agenda.
I have to hop off, but that would be great.
Anybody that wants to chime in on the issue, that'd be a good thing as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.